Okay, got it. Or should have it. So, yep. So what you've got up there is the original. It's not too long.
Yeah.
Which is sort of good. And then I've got my outline. Or it's not really, it's sort of a, there's a little bit of commentary. It's meant to be a bit of an outline. And yeah, I had, so I didn't have trouble like reprocessing it as such. But there's some stuff, so like this here, there's a few times where I make lists because the sentences were sort of complex enough that it was quite difficult to outline.
Okay.
So I figured that's probably a good place to start. Yeah, so I've written a goal at the top to accurately analyze the paper and extract its arguments, re-express them in simple language. Yeah, so do we want to go through any background stuff or sort of deal with that as it comes up? Sort of
As
thing.
it
I
comes
feel
up. Did you work on anything else, or is it just this?
no, pretty much just this. I didn't get much done this weekend at all.
Okay.
Yep. So I think I probably end up doing a bit of a better job towards the end. But starting out, so
Okay, and what's your goal
Mhm.
with writing this?
Yep. So third paragraph there, I think it is.
Uh-huh.
So analyze, extract the arguments, and re-express them in simple language. So there's some sort
Yeah.
of there's a few terms that I feel like are fine in that it's a technical sort of matter. So some terms are fine.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And what's your goal, like one step into the bigger picture? Like you want to do this and then it has some purpose larger than
Um.
this, I would think.
Yeah. So the larger purpose is just that. Or in general, maybe that it's a decent resource for anyone else. But that's sort of a minor goal. The larger goals are to do with like getting into writing like technical stuff on this topic again, but doing so in a simple way as opposed to falling into the sort of like fancy language trap. Yeah, sort of getting myself familiar with this stuff again and writing about it.
Okay. And then
Um,
what's your
mhm.
goal from going over this with me? What do you want to get out of it?
So some feedback with like on a few things related to uh, doing this sort of outlining slash, um, I guess, yeah, like it feels like I've had a little bit of issue in the past outlining stuff and doing it sort of faithfully, I guess, without changing things too much.
Okay.
So yeah, so getting some feedback on that to either figure out where I'm making mistakes or how to avoid them, that sort of thing. Yep. So I had a link at the top, which I couldn't figure out how to make it sort of highlight the sentence particularly well. But I've got a footnote with where that sentence is. This was just the stuff that I wrote after our last tutorial from about that point on. So I sort of took note of that sentence was particularly, or one where I would have done something differently before and then tried to keep it all as one sentence instead of breaking it up into multiple sentences, which I do in a few other places. But that's not the first example in the thing. So yeah, so the first example is in 2.1. Um, so which it starts on the second paragraph in the main text. And it's the second sentence particularly. So I've got those up on my thing. I sometimes quote them or a few times I've quoted them in the footnotes, once actually, I think. But that's sort of a bit of a pain because the footnotes are at the end. So like this sentence was the one that corresponds to that list. And I guess particularly there's, like, if I'm trying to write an idea that has like 4 distinct parts like this in simpler language, like a list is sort of an easy way to do it, but I'm not sure whether it's like accurate, and some of the relationship meaning doesn't carry through. So like I sort of I played with just before this like an idea of trying to abstract out like idea 1, which is why that's there.
I think there's a grammar error in this sentence. You have can be used and you have is,
Oh,
which isn't parallel. Should it be like i.e. can be used as the consensus mechanism?
so that might have been, no, that probably was me. Yes, so what I'd right there instead. So to be more so that is probably good. People propose that proof of stake can be used to predict blockchains, i.e. can be used as the consensus mechanism. That's like definitely less ambiguous.
Isn't evading an impossibility result a good thing?
So yeah, in terms of Bitcoin, like proof of work, this article is like in favor of proof of work and against proof of stake. I don't know what evades a impossibility result means.
It sounds like it means avoids being impossible.
Roughly, yeah, that sort of lines up. I don't know, like I've never this sort of term impossibility result is ambiguous. They don't, like, the author doesn't like particularly point to like something specific. I don't think.
Yeah, I would expect it to be one of the like this is uncomputable kind of things, where something's impossible for math or comp sci reasons.
Yeah, that's roughly what it means. It's just not very well explained in the paper, and I'm not sure if they're referring to something external to this paper either. There's no citation on a relevant thing. It sort of makes a little bit of sense, but yeah.
Yeah, the evades
Um,
is a little weird. What it could mean is that they had to work around to avoid it being impossible, and this made it like awkward in some way because of the effort to work around the problem.
yeah, we sort of, or it does actually deal with that a bit later, like it goes into detail about it. But in essence, it's like there's something that's been proven impossible from a computer science point of view, but it's not economically impossible. So instead of trying to guarantee it with cryptography, we guarantee it with economics, is sort of the idea.
Why is good in brackets?
Because they don't put good in the thing. So the square brackets are usually stuff that I've added that I think adds clarity.
Right, but is it not a paraphrase of the paper? Does the paper just say it's not a replacement?
Yeah, it just says it's not a replacement. One of the reasons I added good is that it is like used as a replacement. Like there are blockchains that use this technique. Um, the paper's sort of arguing that it doesn't have the same security properties, and therefore isn't a replacement. But yeah, I felt like good was a reasonable thing to include. But yeah, the reason it's in brackets is to indicate that it's something I've added. So I probably in general haven't distinguished enough between things that I've added and what the author added. There's a point a little bit further on where I have an exclamation mark that probably should have been like a footnote. Oh no, that's actually
Yeah.
in a footnote. That's fine.
So I think a more accurate word instead of good is viable. They say it doesn't work, so that means isn't viable.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds right. One thing that I do sort of end up thinking of, or not entirely clear on. So yeah, so I try and like when I'm trying to simplify language, using words like good instead of viable, like I'm not necessarily clear on when to use more specific words. Like there are, yeah, maybe I can find an example as we go along.
Okay, so in this case, I think it's better to use a word that you don't feel the need to put square brackets around. I think having good with no square brackets would have been reasonable. It is a decent, it decently fits what they meant. However, you were uncomfortable with that, so I thought we could solve that problem by using a more accurate word.
Yeah,
So
so in the actual
if you think good is too inaccurate to not have a I've changed this marker, then using a more accurate word is a good way to solve that problem.
yeah, that makes sense. The thing itself, like they say, demonstrate that proof of stake does not work as a replacement. So then I guess I've said this paper shows proof of stake is not viable as a replacement in terms of my updated thing that I'm doing here. Um,
I thought
this
your other wording was better. You've added a preposition.
um, yeah, okay, so not a viable replacement. That makes more sense. Yeah, prepositions and stuff, simplifying prepositions has been one of the issues that I've run into, in that it seems hard to do that without changing the sentence structure too much, or changing the sentence entirely in the meaning of it, or breaking it up into multiple sentences, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So with the more specific stuff,
Hmm.
if you can use a simple word and you don't see a problem with it, then do that. But if you think there's a problem, like that you've changed the meaning a bit, then that is a good reason to use a more technical word so that you don't cause that problem.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Um,
Overall, I don't think that this paragraph helps compared to the original. Like the original is pretty short and okay. And I'm
yeah.
unclear what you're trying to improve really.
Um,
And you've ended up with extra parentheses. So it looks more cluttered.
yeah. One of the parentheses there, the or its history and motivation, that's just because it's unclear in the paper. Um, I probably, just thinking about it. So the IE used as consensus mechanism. I think it'd just be probably removed.
The thing which evades the impossibility result is pretty sure Bitcoin's distributed consensus mechanism.
Yes. That's the only thing that makes sense. Grammatically though, I'm not sure if that's prepositional because two is ambiguous, but or two has multiple meanings, but like history and motivation are the objects.
Yeah, but this modifier, I think, is just modifying the thing directly before it. I don't see a problem
Yep.
with that.
Yep. No, okay, cool. Reminds me of Justin's short video on analyzing some of the grammar that we did in like 19. Talks a bit about that, about referring to either objects or objects of prepositional phrases.
We try to put adjectives really close to what they modify. Adverbs get moved around a little bit more, although we still prefer to put them close to what they modify. But
Yep.
adjectives are more strongly close to what they modify than adverbs are.
Yep.
So when you're talking about a fungible store of value, you mean bitcoins. So one BTC is fungible with a different BTC?
Yep. That's the idea. There's sort of like there are ways that can be made better or worse, essentially, which sort of sounds odd as a way to talk about fungibility. Um, it's sort of an interesting topic, but the principle is that they're fungible.
Right, so if you have some BTC and I send you one more, and then you send one to John, there's no such thing as which one you sent to John. Was it the one I sent you or one of the ones you already had, or a mix? Is that right?
In essence, yes. There's a subtlety there in that you can send like one particularly, or you can create a transaction where you like have. So if I had like 5 Bitcoins all split up into 1 Bitcoin chunks, then I could send 1 Bitcoin like just that to John, or I could send 5 Bitcoins, 1 of which goes to John and 4 of which go to me. So the system treats them as fungible, but the inputs and outputs to each transaction, because they're discrete amounts and tied to some like cryptographic identity, there's ways that the fungibility is limited to a degree, I guess. It's yeah, the system itself treats them all as fungible, so there's no restrictions on how you mix them. But if you don't like mix them, or they're not sufficiently sort of chaotic in the transactions, then you can do some analysis on where the transactions came from and like which Bitcoins were which as such. There's this idea called taint that's used to describe this.
So it's not just this address has 10 Bitcoin, send 2 of them somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. I can show you if you want fairly quickly. So like if we pick a transaction here, so this is a transaction where we had like one input on the left. I'll just make sure that there's usually a yeah, okay. One input on the left and then like 7 outputs on the right. And so you can sort of break them up into multiple places. They can like yeah, it doesn't have to be a one-to-one sort of correspondence. And then like this transaction here, with like a whole bunch of inputs and outputs. This one has like many inputs and many destinations, including like what looks like 5 to the same address just here of different amounts. So yeah, Bitcoin, the system, treats all of these as like fungible. Like you can mix however you like. It's just the inputs and outputs have to add up essentially. Technically, the
Yeah.
outputs have to be less than or equal to the inputs, and the difference is the fee. Um, but yeah, so it's you can use like transactions like this to do analysis on like to trace back where coins have come from. So they're not like they're somewhat fungible. The system treats them as fungible, but in reality, there's analysis you can do. Yeah, that sort of shows that they're not exactly fungible. There are other systems that don't have this input-output type system. They just have like an address with a balance. You can still do the same sort of analysis on it, but the system more explicitly treats that as fungible.
Typo.
Oh, sorry, that's it's yeah, I was wondering about that. It's like deliberately spelt like that. It's a term in um blockchain land.
Oh, what does it mean?
So someone who is like a believer in the cryptocurrency, like they're holding for the long term, um, sort of thing.
Ah,
So it came out of someone's typo, on a forum once on Reddit. But yeah, but it sort of refers to a particular way of holding and keeping cryptocurrency.
I think you're trying too hard to copy what the paper says very closely instead of just explaining the ideas.
Yep.
Which system? Like the cryptocurrency itself?
Yeah, the blockchain system, um, or whatever system the distributed census is protecting. But yeah, a blockchain particularly. Um, well, actually, I guess so distributed consensus is like it happens over time, which I don't say, but the system could refer to just to that. Um, Sort of in practice, there's no particular difference. Um, so yeah, the official or the original quote is distributed consensus as the term is used in Bitcoin is a consensus, i.e. global agreement between mutually distrusting parties who lack identities and were not necessarily present at the time of the system setup.
Okay, so one question I have is why you need distributed consensus on order and nothing else. What about whether a transaction happened at all? Is
Um,
different than the order they happen.
yes, that's also something that we need consensus of. I don't know if the original mentions that.
It does not.
Yeah.
I don't see like a significant difference between yours and theirs. Again.
Yeah, this stuff. So I sort of got through this. Oh, I guess maybe a bit further than here, and uh, felt like it was a bit redundant to have done what I'd done so far because the meat of the article is later, and the stuff that's more difficult to understand is later. I sort of just kept going because I figured that it would be good to like just have a complete thing of the whole article as opposed to um, yeah, trying to reprocess it too much, I guess. Um,
Okay, 2.3 then.
yeah, there's not yeah, I think from 2.4 or 2.5 is 2.4 is probably the part that becomes contentious onwards.
Typo.
Yep.
This makes assumptions about the distributions of computing power available.
Yes. It's sort of a. I mean, Satoshi pointed out in the original Bitcoin paper that there's a 51% or there's a like a 50% plus issue. If someone has more than 50% of the computational resources, then they
Yeah.
can control the history. So there is an assumption that no one has that.
Okay, so similar to the previous section, basically.
So what? Sorry.
It's similar to the previous sections. It's rewriting it in different
Mm.
words, but I don't think it's particularly better. Like, I don't see clear reasons for the changes and why this would make it like why someone would want to read this version.
Yep.
Missing two.
Yep.
This is silly.
Yeah. That in my footnote, I say like, no, it doesn't. Laws of physics would go way faster, and the author needs to learn more about basic economics and physics.
We're
Um,
using a small fraction of the energy from one star on this Bitcoin stuff.
well, even just a small fraction of the energy that's available to humans, like um, yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. Also, it's unclear. Like, I don't think anyone really knows how blockchains can work well in a like relativistic environment, um, like communicating between stars or something. So it's not like there's going to be one giant thing of CPU power dedicated to exactly one thing across like the entire galaxy or something.
Okay, well, less resource use does matter and makes sense. Just it's a matter of like uh power plants take work, not heat death of universe.
There is one thing that the author doesn't acknowledge here is that there is like there's a market-based limit on it in that like there's an explicit reward for spending energy, which can be it's a little variable, but we've got ways of dealing with that. Um, if the cost of electricity is higher than the reward you'll get from spending that electricity, then there's no incentive to do it. Um, and so we do have like limits within like our economic setup already. and that the amount, like the reward is something that is like tweakable. So it goes down over time typically.
So people are randomly chosen, and then they're asked, will you lock up some money for some amount of time? Is this usually a short time, a long time, like small amount of money, a large amount of money?
So it usually goes the other way. They, like, in locking up their money, they like add themselves to the set of people to be chosen from. It depends on the scheme. In like there's dozens of different schemes that people have come up with. In one of the more popular ones, I think it's 3 months is how long you lock it up for. Um, and I'm not sure if it's all of that period that you're able to be chosen. It might be like you need to lock it up and then a month later you become like available to be chosen. Things like that.
So, rough summary, instead of the miners who do the most work having the most say in what transactions happened in what order, it's replaced with votes from people who lock up their money temporarily.
In essence, yeah. Because the set of people who lock up their money might be really big, some subset is chosen, sort of like sortition.
Yeah.
So there's an example here talking about Ethereum, where they give an example of a node depositing or having a deposit length of 4 months.
If they sign the wrong one that doesn't become consensus, do they lose money or something?
Yeah, so newer schemes have what's usually called like a slashing, or they call it slashing, where if it's proven that you've signed two conflicting histories, then you lose all or part of your deposit.
What if you just sign one that conflicts with what everyone else signed, but you don't conflict with yourself?
I don't think there's a penalty for that. It's part of the reason that they don't have a 100% like requirement on the set of signers to all agree, particularly because there's different histories and stuff that people see, and so you don't want to be too overzealous with it and make people lose money when there's no reason to do that. So if they only sign one history, then there's that's taken as not enough evidence to penalize them.
This begs the question thing is hard to follow what the claim.
Yeah, I think I'm not even sure if it's
Oh, it's just in the original.
yeah,
It's not your thing.
it's an annoying phrase. I mean, what they
Yeah,
essentially mean is, yeah, oh, well,
I think it would work better to just try to explain the issues yourself in a way you think makes sense.
Yep.
This copying like the parts you didn't like uh is confusing, and then you might as well just read the original instead. This is an example of something being too jumpy. It's hard to follow. You say, but every block needs new signers. But then you look previously in the paragraph, and the word block does not appear, nor does signers. So it's to follow it requires just like already understanding the concept in advance. You have to like
Yep.
know what these things are before you read it, so it's not explaining them, it's relying on pre-existing knowledge.
Yep. I think this is actually like the original uses blocks, like block and signers. I'm not sure if they use. There's like one mention of block beforehand.
Okay, so you're just copying again pretty closely.
Yeah, I was like unhappy a bit with how like some of the sentences that I mean, yeah, a lot of it felt like I wasn't really adding any value by re-expressing it, even if it was slightly simpler. Oh, sorry, yep, discuss.
Typo here as well.
Yeah, okay, yep.
Yeah, overall, do you think you learned much by writing this?
So not particularly. There were the issues with like outlining stuff that I think I guess realized more about. I'm not sure how important they really are though in terms of stuff in future. Like if I was doing this again, and wanted it to be more valuable, in terms of just like rewriting it, but in a simpler way that's more direct, then I wouldn't have those issues. So I'm not sure how important they are to figure out. There are like some things that like the notes that I've got here are good. In terms of, I guess I feel a bit, because I feel like I'm like redeveloping ideas to a certain extent. I'm not sure, like what to. I'm trying not to use pre-existing knowledge too much, I guess. Or I'm more skeptical of it, or less trusting of it. So in that sense, this is good because it sort of, yeah, I don't know, like this wasn't a huge amount of effort or time, but I think it's probably been valuable. I don't know if it's been particularly valuable or like, there's probably better things I could have done, but um, I guess a lot of the time I'm not really sure before I start whether something falls into that category or not.
Yeah, that's okay. You can try lots of things.
I guess part of the other thing as well is that I wanted to like this is something that's like much easier. It's easier than like trying to re-express it or like as in to actually rewrite the entire thing. And so in part, I don't want to like jump ahead too much, even though there's like other aspects of things where I'm doing that, like Solomon-off induction or whatever. But yeah, but this is like something that I felt more confident about.
Did this help you understand the paper better? Like, did it clarify it for you as you went through it
Uh,
closely?
a little bit. I got the gist of it the first time I read it. I mean, part of the reason that I chose to use this as a focus was because like it was criticized for being hard to read. And I mean, like some stages, some bits of it are. I mean, there's like in part 6, they like one paragraph starts with the problem with this argument is simple, and the next paragraph starts with this is a bit abstruse, which I hope isn't a joke. But yeah, so because it was like criticized for being not so easy to understand, I figured that it might be like a thing where there might be some like value in it, essentially. to redo it. But I think there'd probably just be more value in writing a post on the same topic, where this is like a citation.
Yeah, one thing I noticed, you keep mentioning other people thought it was hard to understand, but you just read it once and you thought you got the main idea. So it seems like maybe you actually disagreed with those people who thought it was hard to understand. Or do you think you agreed with them and you're just like a clever reader?
Um, I guess a little bit of the second. I wouldn't say clever reader, but I feel like I'm like a lot better at parsing this sort of stuff now than I was some time ago. Like, 3 months ago. Um, I can understand why people would say that it's difficult to understand, though, in terms of a lot of the original stuff is not particularly well written. Part of that's like assumed knowledge, but other parts of it are just that it's not well written. Um,
I didn't think it was too bad. I've seen way worse. Does
yeah,
not stand out to me.
okay, fair enough. I haven't read many like blockchain technical papers recently, so I don't have a good sense for what's out there.
Yeah, I'm not really comparing to those because I don't have a sense of that either. I'm just comparing to like papers in general.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not as bad as some papers for sure. Well, I mean, the text that we've analyzed in like possible minds and stuff is some of that's way worse.
And that's like a popular book that's meant for lay audiences. Whereas this is meant to be technical and for people in a niche. Yeah, usually what I do with something like this probably is figure out what I think are the important ideas and then only write about those and not redo the rest and give myself more leeway to reorganize it and uh like alter the presentation, explain it my own way, use my own examples, stuff like that. To sort of say like this paper has a good point, but it's hard to follow. So here are like the key ideas that people could use help with understanding, and here's how I would explain them.
Yep, that makes more sense. Um, yeah. I mean, thinking about it, it's probably uh, like might have been more valuable to sort of write some of the stuff I've talked about as a bit of an intro, and then literally just do that, and sort of uh, comment on the paper as well as explaining the ideas as I went through. Um, Commenting on the paper's not even necessary. Um, but yeah,
I'm thinking about options for what to do next. Have you read any of my social stuff recently?
not within the last week. I haven't kept up with much over the last week. Is that there? It looks like there's some updates.
Yeah, I have a few blog posts.
So this might have been around the last time I read anything. I don't think I've read Forum Moderation Needs Any Bias Policies, or maybe some of it. But yeah. So that list looks like a decent list to me, by the way.
Okay, do you have any preferences?
So the middle two are probably best. I don't think there's been much that's been like there hasn't been much on anything related to LessWrong and myself. I haven't posted in since our last thing. So in terms of doing a tree, I felt like I'm not sure how good the example from my conversation was. It was like good to use it as an example for other reasons, but in terms of doing a tree, not sure whether there'd be better examples.
Yeah, the discussion didn't get very far.
I was thinking about the idea that we had, or that you mentioned at the end of last session about like a discussion method of like one person asks a question, one person, or you respond and
Oh,
ask like in each thing.
yeah.
I'm not sure if there are any examples of that, but that might be. I was thinking that like at least having an example for myself would be useful. Not sure if analyzing it would be the most useful thing to analyze, but
Yeah, there's
yeah.
I know I did it with Kieren. People don't stick to it like rigorously all the time. But there's some major section of the discussion where we're doing that. Let's see, at a time. I think this is an example, probably. Like, you look for the things where there's two quotes, and those tend to be it. Like, here I'm asking him a question. Like, I'm trying to advance my part of the discussion, I think. And then the second part, I think I'm answering I'm answering his question. The question marks are good hints, right? So, like, here, there's no question from him, and I'm asking a question. And then in part two, there's a question from him, and there's no question marks in my text.
Yep.
And then here he is, so it looks like here's him answering me, then here's him quoting my answer to him, and then here's him replying for part two. So part one is the discussion I control, and part two is the discussion he controls.
Yep. Did this work out, by the way, as long as it was being maintained?
Yeah, even without maintaining it very strictly, I think it generally helped.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not being done very strictly, but it's giving people permission to like not respond to everything and making it easier to be selective.
Yeah, okay. How do you deal with the case when, like, as you exhaust one of the uh like branches of the tree and sort of resolve that, and then go back up to like the next one? Is that just up to the person who's like finishing it off or whatever at the time?
Yeah, whoever controls that half of the discussion can just decide at any time to switch focus to something else. Like, you don't have to
Okay, yep.
resolve it. It's just up to you. You can like tangent whenever you want, and if the other person doesn't like that you dropped something, they can bring it up in their half.
Yep. Yeah, okay. That's sort of I quite like the idea. It feels very balanced.
Yeah, and if someone asks multiple questions at once, you can just answer one of them of your choice, and if they want an answer to a different one, they can just repeat it.
Yep. Is there a good way, by the way, to ask? So, I think I might have mentioned it um, last session or the session before. Like a question where you sort of want to lead down a chain of reasoning, and you're really interested in the end answer, but you're also interested in the like if you've gone wrong somewhere in a chain of reasoning. I guess could you say like this is my reasoning? Like, is there an error in it? And if not, what's the answer to the question? Is that like
Yeah,
fair
that's
or
fine. Yeah, I
okay?
think that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, it's pretty flexible. If they think it's too much stuff at once to deal with, they might just say, I don't see an error. I'll deal with your question next time or something.
Yep.
Like, I'm busy, I gotta go. That you used up my time budget on checking for the error. If they do that, it's not a big deal. Re-ask.
Yep. So one thing that I'm thinking in terms of the list of ideas you came up with, so this might be a good thing for me to like create a tree of this discussion. Um, but I'm also wondering whether it's a good thing for me to do like between this session and next session, because I'm not sure I'll need that much. Uh,
Yeah,
like
so be aware that that is a very long discussion.
yeah, yeah, okay. Is most of it with Kieren or just
Yeah,
those
yeah,
middle
yeah. The
parts?
vast majority of the comments on this page was me and Kieren.
Okay, yep. Oh, I don't need to tree out all of it, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily. Um, I could try
Yeah,
starting at the beginning.
I think the start is messy, and if you try to start in the middle, it's tricky because there's context.
Yep. Yeah, okay. Um, where I was going to go after that was that if it was something to do between sessions, whether we should look at some of the LessWrong social stuff, because that is quite interesting to me in general.
Okay. So, yeah, so I got these replies. This was my first post when I came back to LessWrong. I hadn't like annoyed anyone yet by writing comments or something. Right? I just write a completely impersonal blog post about Goldratt stuff. And then
Mhm.
you can see the 6 top level replies I got. And see what you think of them. Maybe start with
Yeah.
this one at the bottom because it's the shortest.
Oh, we've got tag again. Um,
Yeah.
a subcomponent that already had excess capacity. Okay, so I don't know particularly what that's referring to, but we can get that in a tick. What does that even mean? A claim or proposition cannot have a probability over 1. If capacity is not analogous to probability, what is it analogous to? In other words, don't add more plausibility to an idea when you improve a subcomponent that already has excess capacity. Okay, so I understand what this means because like it seems basic theory of constraints. It's just like an
Yeah.
improvement that's not to the bottleneck is not adding any
Yeah.
uh
Also, like, note the outline. So we're in part 3, applied to ideas, right? So I've already explained it. I've already given other examples, and now I'm giving a third, another section, a different example. So I'm not fully explaining it because I already did earlier.
yeah, so we've got like excess capacity, which has been used like it's a
Over and
repeated
over.
term. Yeah. Um, um, and then is this just a direct like restatement sort of thing? Don't evaluate the quality of components of an idea and combine them into a weighted average, which comes out higher when there's excess capacity for non-bottlenecks. That sounds like sort of an expansion slash restatement. So tags
and I
like,
also, like, literally I try to say what excess capacity for an idea is. That was in, like, the next paragraph after what you were looking at.
oh yeah, so what is
Here.
excess capacity for an idea? Um,
Right, so, like, right here, I think I answer his question. That's not a probability.
well, let's, if I, not to actually reply, but just to compare them. So what does that even mean? And then, yeah, claim or proposition can't have probability over 1. Already had excess capacity. Why would excess capacity be like over 1? Like if you were looking at it from a probability point of view. So yeah, ideas or purposes. Excess capacity means the idea is more than adequate to accomplish its purpose.
Yeah, so that's what that even means.
Yep, that seems to make sense. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of it reminds me a little bit of, I think there was an example in something you'd written about someone being like, "Oh, I read your last article on murder, and I'm a really big fan, but what about this question about murder?" And then the reply is like, "I'm not writing an article about murder. I'm against murder," sort of thing. About people like deliberately misinterpreting you, or worse, misquoting. Um,
Like, yeah, I think he doesn't understand what I was talking about, which is fine, but I don't think that these questions are doing a good job of expressing what's going on.
yeah. No, I don't think they're good at expressing what's going on. They're also not good at they're not making it clear what he's getting at, particularly because like 3 sentences later, there's something that should directly answer his question. Um, I don't. It's. I'm not sure if you've mentioned anything about probability or things um, up till then, but otherwise, I'm not sure why he's introducing it. Um,
Yeah, so the analogous part is problematic too, because he's at, like, if it's not analogous to this, what's it analogous to is weird, like, because the real question is what does it mean, not what is it analogous to, but what is it? He's adding,
yeah,
like, this assumption that it's an analogy, which it isn't. Um,
yeah.
but anyways, so to do social analysis, you want to consider why is he saying this? What are his goals? What does he expect the audience to think of this? Who does he think is gaining or losing social status? Like questions like those, and then see if you come up with anything.
So it sort of feels like most of the time people are going to say things that try to make their social status look better. Um, in terms of what, like, this feels like, I mean, on the one hand, it feels lazy on Tag's part, but it's meant to. It looks like it's meant to reflect that, or say that, like, your post or explanation was inadequate in some fundamental way that should be like easy to catch. In that, quoting a small part like this, um, I mean, it's sort of odd where it comes from, but it's questioning something that's like fairly core to what you're posting about, and also something that you've like a term that you've used a dozen times beforehand. But for someone who isn't familiar with that, it looks like your post is insubstantial. I think is roughly what it's meant to do. And then it's like, refuted by this, like, well, he says something um, like that's sort of self-evident, that probabilities don't go over 1, um,
Yeah,
which I think is probably meant to contrast in that, because it's like an obvious statement, it makes his position look more reasonable. Like it's 1 out of 3 sentences sort of thing.
yeah. He's trying to suggest that somehow I don't know this or need to be told this or should have taken into account, all of which is calling me dumb.
Yeah. Um, if like I could see a statement like this if it's like if someone's being like particularly explicit and trying to like lay out all the steps and whatever else, and it comes into reasoning later, I can see something like that being sensible to write, but it's out of place here. And then like this like the third sentence sort of continues that in that it's so I mean, besides the shifted goalposts in that it's analogous, not what is it, but it's sort of like the thing you said doesn't make sense. Fact that's not controversial, and then if it's not this, then what is it, sort of thing. Except what's it's analogous to, which is sort of, I guess it's sort of a way to like try and put down your opponent in like a debate, in that it's treating them like there's something obvious that they're missing, and that like this is, yeah, like this is something that everyone should get, or it should have been easy to spot, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so first of all, you asked if I brought up probability. I did not. So I searched the page, 8 matches for probability. All 8 of them are in other people's comments. So, like,
Yep.
everyone replies by saying stuff about probability, which I didn't mention once.
So the closest I can see is, yeah, it probably doesn't make the chain stronger, which is not like,
Yeah, it's just a minor hedge.
yeah, and it's not, people would understand that that's not like an explicit statement about like some probabilistic relationship or some relationship between probabilities. Yeah, and then yeah, probabilities.
Yeah, so a couple more things with tag. One is, how much effort is he putting into his comment? And how much effort is he asking me for?
So he's putting in basically nothing. It's not even clear if he's read the stuff. Well, it's evidence that he hasn't read the stuff beforehand, because it's things that you've explained.
Yeah.
He's expecting like a blog post in response, sort of thing, or at least a few hundred words. Like, create an analogy and explain it to me is sort of the demand from this last sentence.
Do you think that he actually wants to know the answer to his question? Is he
No,
curious? Yeah, so
no, I
you'll
don't think
note
so.
that you'll see this reply. I wrote a response to someone else that answered his question like a lot because I gave a ton of worked examples. So I linked it to him and he did not respond.
Yeah, I think that was like a good response, by the way.
You mean this post or this comment?
Yeah, this comment is a good way to respond to that sort of stuff if you've got a resource like that other post.
Yeah, so effort-based analysis is really important to social dynamics. So some of the key things to look for when you're analyzing social are who is putting in how much effort, who is asking for how much effort, who is reacting to who gets to question who answers to who ignores the other guy's questions, demands, requests, etc., who gives hints and expects the other guy to figure out what the fuck he means. Like a boss who is just sorta do this, you know what I mean. And then the subordinate has to figure out how to make it work. It's a little like in the Fountainhead. You've read that, right? Have you read the
Yep.
Fountainhead?
Yes, yeah, I have.
Okay, yeah. So, uh, Guy Franken is the leader of the architecture firm where Keating works, and he gives people like these little hints and vague ideas about what you should do with the building. Like, he barely gives any design advice and lets them figure out the details. He's just sort of like, oh, design it how I would design it. Make it pretty. Make it really nice. Good luck. And that's
Yep.
like the guidance.
Does he is there a stage where he like reacts badly, like he gives like hints and then someone like goes over the top and doesn't like it or anything like that? I'm just trying to remember the details.
I'm not sure
Uh,
what you mean. No.
no, okay. Oh, it'd be like oh, this is good, but you should add more uh I don't know, curly pillars or whatever else. And then they add lots of curly
Oh,
pillars and it's like that's too many.
oh well, at the beginning, um, Kieren gets him to make Stengel change the drawing, and Kieren tells him that like his convenience, or like making it nice in his view, is more important than Stengel's convenience of having to redo it. So it's completely a power play of like Kieren tells the guy to use his authority, and the guy like hesitates, and then Kieren gets him to do it. So Kieren actually won a battle of controlling the exercise of someone else's authority. And then,
Mm.
as minor consolation, Guy Franken tells Keating that a different color tie would look better. And Keating's like, you'll see it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And lets
Um,
him win
is-
that one.
yeah. Keating later gets the guy fired, doesn't he?
Yeah, he gets rid of a couple people in his way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, might need to re-review parts of that. It was 2 years ago, I think, that I read it.
Okay, so who is more needy is a big one. Like, who is happy with the status quo? Who wants change? Like, being in a good situation already is high status. Wanting anything to change is low status.
Yeah.
So he doesn't come off as needy. He's acting like he doesn't really care. He doesn't come off as very reactive. Like
Isn't ripping into
he
you or
isn't
anything.
reacting in any like nuanced or sophisticated way to what I said. Like he's barely paying attention to what I said. He's putting in low effort. He's questioning me. He's not answering any of the things I wanted answers to. Like if you look through my post, there are the occasional question. There's prompts that you could think like, that maybe this would be a good place to respond to the post. I don't think I have anything too explicit, but like I was trying to make it relevant to LessWrong, in like reasonably clear ways and get feedback, and he's not doing that.
Yep.
He's being demanding. He's asking me to like bridge the gap to come to him instead of coming to me. Like
Yeah. Um,
so there's a bunch of hints that he's acting above me and like he doesn't value my post. And if I reply normally, like if I just do what he wants, if I give direct replies, then his framing of the situation is more powerful than mine. Like he takes over control of the interaction.
mm,
And he gets the opportunity to snub me, or just to, like if I answer his questions, he could just ask me more questions. And he could make them even a little bit more aggressive, like gradually ramp up the liberties he's taking as I get like sucked into it.
yep.
Whereas like this post this post does not acknowledge my framing of what I'm writing about, what kind of article I wrote, what it means, is it important, what kind of conversation are we having. Like he's throwing all that out the window. Like the tone I tried to set, the issues I tried to focus on. I was trying to talk about bottlenecks and excess capacity, and he's like, let's talk about probability and ignore all this Goldratt stuff completely. So he's
Yeah.
trying to push
Yep.
his narrative on top of my narrative, and my narrative was like the entire blog post, and his narrative is 2 lines, and he's still trying to overwrite mine with it.
Yeah. I think it's sort of like in hindsight, it's sort of funny that he's said this, considering that he refused to call himself an inductivist or a Bayesian.
Yeah, okay, so then another thing. Why is the word even here?
Oh, diminishment. Um, like, I think it's so it sort of strikes me as the same way that like just is used um, sometimes, in that uh, well, I think it's an adverb. Um, so used to emphasize something surprising or extreme is the thing. So an example, he knows even less about it than I do. So it's uh, sort of saying that like I'm surprised to read this. It's an extreme statement. It's not uh, something that people would like. It's ridiculous, I guess, is what it's sort of
Yeah,
conveying.
so it's an overt attack. Like, I don't think there's a way to read this where it's neutral or friendly.
Yeah, no, I can't think of it. Um,
But for some reason it's not obvious enough. It doesn't count as overtly attacking. People will read it as an attack, but I think if I said, "Hey, why are you attacking me?" people would be like, "What are you talking about? Why do you have a thin skin?" Even though there's
mm,
this overt thing here that um I think they would have a hard time offering any other interpretation of what it meant and why that word is there.
yeah. Um, I'm wondering about like that as well. Like you could say, what does that mean? You could also say, what does this mean? I feel like that is a distancing reference as
Yes.
opposed to,
Yeah, that is
yeah,
stuff that's further away. This is stuff that's closer. It's like here
mm,
versus there, kind of.
sort of like as though you've like said something some way away and is like, replying from a distance. What does that even mean? As opposed to like being involved in the conversation. Um,
Yeah, this one's more ambiguous. That is a very common word.
mm. No, I can see like this usage being innocent. Even is I can only see it being like ignorant as opposed to innocent. Like I've like often read or sorry written stuff like this and then gone and like edited it later because I realized that it's like I'm putting like emphasis in places that aren't making like the question any better. They're not explaining what I want to get out of it any better. The idea that I'm replying to less fairly.
Notice anything about the word to?
Um, oh, yeah. What is it? Analogous also. Yeah. No, that's just I mean, so a typo like this, does that uh, play to like increase or decrease social status? It makes it look more like uncaring or relaxed or whatever else.
Yeah,
But also
typos
like,
signal low effort sometimes. It's one of those ambiguous signals. It's clearer than the that, but like you put what they often do is they put a bunch of ambiguous signals and then you sort of get an overall feel for what they're communicating, even though
yeah,
like most of the individual things they've done are deniable. But there's a pattern
yeah.
that people pick up
I
on.
I could see like yeah, I could see this just being a typo and maybe tags the type of person who would be bothered by typoing stuff and just didn't realize. But it also fits really well with the like low effort, don't really care um, sort of gist of the rest of it.
Yeah, like typos become more likely when you don't care. So then the typos are signal for not caring. Um,
Yeah,
it's not a reliable signal, but it's on average it's signal.
yeah.
Adding typos on purpose, by the way, is like literal PUA advice for texting.
Wow, fair enough. Huh. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
I always, I always just feel like when I make typos, it makes me look like I'm drunk.
It's not the worst thing. To look like
No,
you texted her while you were drunk, you just didn't care.
it's sort of
Okay,
interesting in that. Oh yeah, sorry.
go ahead.
Um, I was just gonna say it's sort of interesting in that it's the opposite of like taking pride in oneself or like in one's communication or things. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful. You add a typo that doesn't make it hard to read or ambiguous.
Mm.
You pick your
Yeah, you
typo
don't
carefully, so you don't ruin the meaning.
just put an ETH or no, what is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, te.
TEH.
There's that or ETE was a typo that was I can't remember what I was. Anyway, I think it was in a video game. It was inserted into a document somewhere, like deliberately, as like flavor. Um, anyway, someone commented on it in something I was watching.
Okay, what do you think about this one, John Wentworth?
Is that the one at the top?
Yeah.
Okay. So immediately when I read this like 30 minutes ago, the first thing that occurred to me is this reminded me of like I sympathize with the spirit of the post. Um, I'm not sure if that carries through or not, or how it carries through, but yeah. So the idea is a valuable one. Okay. So I like what this post is trying to do, as opposed to I like this post. So there's sort of a qualifier there that's interesting.
Yes.
Um, the idea is valuable or a valuable one. Um, I don't think it's particularly worse to say the idea is a valuable one as opposed to the idea is valuable, but it is slight diminishment um, because it's now like it's one of a set as opposed to just treated individually. Um, but this explanation could use some work. Okay, so I sympathize, but um, not just because the inferential distances are large, which is mentioning because you particularly mentioned it. So I don't know,
Yes.
like
He's trying to tell
it's
me
sort
I'm wrong about that, which I think is ridiculous. But that's a
so
like content issue.
so the explanation could use some work, not just because of the thing that you mentioned about inferential distances, which is true, but you didn't take it seriously enough. Like that's what it sort of feels like as the underlying meaning, that it's sort of yeah, it's like it's your fault for not taking this idea serious enough, even though you flagged it, it was still like not high enough quality or something.
I read it
Um,
more as inferential distances aren't the problem, stop using that as an excuse. That was my initial reading.
okay. I mean, it is. This is positioned as like, I mean, the just. But it's
I
positioned as
know there's
like
a
a
just,
secondary
but I
reason.
read it the other way anyways, which I think it's like hinting at least.
Yes. Yeah. No, I can see it. I mean, it's was that similar to like it has this like why would he mention it as a secondary reason? Um, he sort of put it first, but has a second like is uh you know not just A but also B sort of thing. Um, anyway, yeah, it seems okay. Yeah, so that's it's still. I mean, if he really was interested in inferential distances, and I mean, it doesn't EY like advocate like essentially like a tolerance type thing in this. That's like this is. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've read it all.
Yeah, well, there's multiple essays, but I think the basic takeaways are, yeah, significant tolerance, significant awareness of the issue, significant trying to backtrack towards simpler things to find common ground, and like patience and working through it, and you should expect to do that, and so on.
Yep. Um, yeah. Yep. So I think he's not really working within the spirit of that here. Um, then this follow-up, like just reading it now, but because the presentation itself is too abstract to clearly communicate the intended point. So if it was too abstract, how does he know what the intended point is? But moreover, he's just blaming you for not understanding it. Like,
Yes.
uh, yeah, it could use more work because it's too abstract to be clear. Um,
Yeah,
how is
it's
he?
kind of funny. he's like, it's not an we have this problem other than inferential distance, consisting of I didn't understand you.
Yeah. Um, yeah, like I mean, this is sort of just elaborating, but strongly recommend, like this is a status sort of indicator here, like that he has the position to strongly recommend something to you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So when I read this, I read it, there are a bunch of negative things, which I noticed, but I took it positively anyways, for two reasons. One is he provided information about what he didn't understand and what follow-up he wanted, which is that could be a productive conversation, right? Like there's somewhere to go with it. As opposed to like Tag, who was it's very hard to reply to Tag in a productive way and move the conversation forward. Because he's just sort of like asking a question I already answered. He's not trying to focus further conversation in a useful way. He's just like, I don't get the thing you already said. And I'm like, why not? You didn't It's
yeah,
not much, it's really bad feedback. But the other one is like, it's abstract, give me some concrete examples, and then we'll talk more, is kind of the vibe.
mm,
Right, so that seems like it could go somewhere good.
yep.
That so there's that, and then the other reason I took it positively. Like, what do you make of the first two sentences?
So he is actually like these are just outright positive statements. Um,
Yes.
yeah, they're
Right,
not
and it's
qualified.
not
Like,
just what I was trying to do. He says the idea is valuable. So it's not just the
mm,
intent is valuable, actually the idea is valuable.
yep. Which is, although there's the, qualification here, it is like it's not, there's no like prepositions on it that, you know,
Yeah.
like,
And the qualifications, the doubts, the buts, are entirely about communication and presentation, not about the idea.
mm,
There's no diminishment of I like the intention, the idea is valuable. Here's how I want to like continue the conversation.
yep, yep. It is clear what you do. Like you could edit the post to like satisfy this, whereas with tag, there's no way you could edit the post to actually answer his like, I don't even want to say criticism, his like his post sort of thing. Um, it's not, there's no substance there. Whereas this is, yeah, there's two distinct halves. And they're at least both like at least useful or positive.
Yeah, so do you want to guess what happened next?
Like in this thread.
Or like with the yeah. I mean, don't click through, but
Okay, yep.
like what
Um,
happened next with John? Like I wrote a reply post with examples, then what happens? And like
did he
overall, do
reply
you
at
think
all?
his post was positive or negative? Like how do you read it in total? Conclusion.
Um, so I feel like it's overall slightly negative, particularly because the thing that he's asking for is pretty basic. So like there are some, so the positive statements could have been more qualified. The negative stuff could have also been, or when I say more qualified, sorry, I mean like more direct. Like I really like this post, and the idea is super valuable. Um, the negative stuff could have also been like different if he understood it or thought he understood it, but thought other people would have trouble with it. Um, like if he says, it's like I reckon that some people would have trouble reading this though, and if you added 2 to 3 concrete examples, it would make it like clearer and more widely understandable. So if you said something like that, it's basically got the same sort of uh, like criticism in it, except that it's way less. So it's less wordy and there's less like signals or other stuff going on. Um, Maybe he didn't want to do that because he wanted to mention inferential distances, because he felt like he needed to. But overall, I see it as like slightly negative. Um,
Yep. So he did not reply at all.
Yep.
So I thought that the first two sentences were too direct and overt, and people don't usually lie that blatantly. So I mispredicted what would happen. Because I didn't think he would say this if he actually thought it was trash and was going to ignore me.
Yep.
I thought this was like overdoing, and yeah, so I have several ideas about what happened and what enabled him to lie more blatantly than people usually do.
Yep.
As well as there's a major clue in his post. Um, the main things I came up with are he thinks lying is excusable because he's softening criticism. It's like, this is really good, you deserve a gold star, but also here's what's wrong with it. And he thinks it's okay to lie in order to manipulate people you're educating and prevent them from getting discouraged or something like that. Because like criticism's too hard to take, so you say like overly positive things to counteract it. And that makes like lying okay. And my other theory is you lie to people to encourage them, and it's like if you're lying to like little kids to encourage them, even when they do a bad job, that's completely accepted and normal because encouraging them is good and like excuses the lie.
Mm. So
And there are signs that he's acting in sort of a mentory, teachery way.
yeah, so this like feels the particular like way that these two statements are hedged, feels like that. Um, like, oh, little Charlie, I really like what you've tried to do with this finger painting sort of thing. Um, like that distancing of like trying to do, is yeah, I feel like is pretty typical of the way that like kids are, um, yeah, manipulated through that sort of false support or false I don't know what to call it. Yeah, false encouragement.
Yeah. Yeah, so I saw like I picked up on a lot of the negatives, but I didn't discount the very direct statements enough. I wasn't suspicious enough that he would just flat lie. So then also there was a clue I noticed, but I didn't analyze it in detail and get hung up on it, which I think is a very important clue, which I think you might have mentioned earlier. So he says the idea is a valuable one, and he says that I didn't clearly communicate it. And if I didn't clearly communicate it, how does he know what the idea is in order to say that it's valuable?
Unless, of course, he's already had this idea. There's like that sort of overtone, maybe, which I don't think is the case. But that would be the only out that I could see to make sense of that.
Maybe, yeah. I don't think that's realistic. It's like Goldratt
Okay.
stuff. But yeah, so I think that he just didn't keep his story straight, which is a common thing with liars. I think he like cared so little about what he was saying that he just contradicted himself because he didn't mean what he said in the first part, and that's why he contradicted it.
Yep. He did actually mean the stuff in the second.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, the other thing is I checked his comment history after I came up with my theory of what was going on, and he status signals a lot and has shallow conversations. He doesn't get into details with people, and he overly praises people repeatedly. So it's actually he tells similar lies, not quite this strong, or usually he's more vague. Like his lies are usually better calibrated. That he's like, this is great, and it's like you know that's it's a lot easier to say this is great without meaning it than the idea is valuable. It is valuable. It's like harder to say you didn't mean or take back or something. It's more specific and like harder to lie about. But he does some like just sort of generic brown nosing suck up type stuff, like scattered throughout his comments pretty often.
yep.
So I
Um,
think he's a chronic liar, so he's already like halfway there to telling this lie just from his general policies, which makes it easier for him to go further than people usually do.
yep.
He Yeah, the UI is really, really bad, by the way. Like, he has 880 comments, and all you can do is, like, scroll through the most recent few, and then click load more, and then scroll down and click load more. Like, there's seems to be no way to go to the last page or something.
It's not even, at least with like the auto loading stuff, you can just hold page down and like, or put something on it and go make a coffee and come back and you'll have everything, as opposed to like
Yeah,
this is the type of thing where oh, hold, why are these different fonts? Answer. Is this like, oh, because they're like question threads, right? Where you
yeah,
can
I don't
offer
know.
answers and then the comments are different. Um,
Anyway, I wanted to see if there was a
yeah.
change over time. Like, he has 880 comments. Did he used to get in discussions with people, or did he just do this, like, very gradually, not really get into discussions over a long number of years, because his account's, like, 9 years old? I was curious, but I couldn't check. But anyways, his recent comments. Yeah, he doesn't really have discussions. He status symbols and he lies. So, rip. All of the other comments were more blatantly negative. Like, so like you could look at Dagon next.
So, yeah, I'm just noticing. So I noticed there was like a limit parameter in the URL once I started
Oh,
clicking down. And so I put 900 in and it's taking a long time. So this might be yeah, okay. All right. So that does seem to, well, we've got a lot at least. Um, that's, obviously pretty silly. It's not something you'd expect people to
yeah, I
necessarily
wasn't
put
paying
in.
attention to that. Because it seems like an Ajax thing, so I wouldn't expect an Ajax thing to be changing the URL. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, what's particularly like not good about this? So there are like lots of Ajax things that change the URL. YouTube does this actually for some stuff, where it has like where they have like you load a new page, but it doesn't seem to actually change, like it doesn't refresh the whole page. It's like the background stays there on the background and menu and it loads. Um, and particularly like there's a lot of stuff after the hash. Um, so you'll get like something and then like hash and then like URL stuff after the hash. That's okay. This is a parameter that's like sent to the server. So you'd expect like this to like change the result you get back from the server, not Ajaxy stuff normally.
Yeah.
It's just a bit of a hack with that. But it's like
Yeah, but I thought the load more button was Ajax, so it's
it,
confusing. That's why I didn't even look for a query string.
it is. I suspect everything is Ajax. I think what happened is that I loaded the page and it loaded the code for the UI, and then the UI refused to show anything until it had loaded all of those comments. That's what I suspect would have
Oh
happened.
yeah, I'm getting it to load now.
There might be caching in there, which is why it's like if it's sped up considerably. Um, yeah, so this GraphQL stuff.
Yeah, he was a low
Um,
volume poster for years. Like it's okay, there's a bunch of stuff from 7 years ago. Then
I think yeah.
six, no, six, he only wrote a few comments 6 years ago. So yeah, I'm at 2 years ago, and like look where the scroll bar is at 2 years ago. So his comment history is
Oh
mostly
wow.
over 2 years or less. And
What?
he's certainly status signaling here about how other people are putting in time for his benefit.
I missed that. Sorry. Um,
I'm
so
not
I was
putting
just
in
looking.
effort, and you guys are. Keep at it. Good job.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, so
It's
the loading,
it's like ambiguous by itself, but if there's a pattern.
um, the loading stuff, by the way, of all the comments, I presume are like there's a whole bunch of requests here of like 20 to 50 kilobytes, or on like a GraphQL endpoint. I think that's probably um,
Yeah.
yeah, like you can see the thing there. So it does load after the page. It is Ajax, which makes all that more confusing. Okay, so Dagon's comment. All right, so I think I read this at the time. BA. So he says, I think I've given away over 20 copies of the goal and recommended it to coworkers hundreds of times. So it's like establishing status or something, or familiarity with the material. Thanks for the chance to recommend it again. I'm not sure what he means by that. Who is he recommending it to?
The people reading the comments.
It's much more approachable than theory of constraints, which is a curious thing to write. Like, did Goldratt write a book called Theory of Constraints?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. And it's more entertaining, still conveying enough about his worldview. So general comments on the book and things.
Yeah, so
And
Theory of
then,
Constraints is a non-fiction book. It is not recommended to start with. So he's signaling that he reads the fancy book, but he recommends the beginner book to other people.
so, yeah, then he has this. I remember this being funny at the time. So it's important to recognize the limits of the chain metaphor, which I'm not sure if you like respond to this particularly, but this sort of struck me as like it's only a chain metaphor if you think about it as a physical chain, but it's not a metaphor in terms of like an abstract chain.
Yeah. I mean, I read this as, oh, I'm such a Goldratt fan, but you should recognize that Goldratt's wrong and his ideas are limited. I'm like, what?
Yeah, this is so. Is he arguing that Goldratt's actually like outright wrong here? Like in the
He's trying
strength
to
of a
say it's
link?
not outright wrong, it's just a limited thing that doesn't fit in most real world situations, which absolutely contradicts Goldratt, who said that his thing applied in lots of real world situations and was useful.
Yeah, not just that, but when he says like most real world situations are more like a mesh or a circuit than a linear chain, the first thing that occurs to me is like critical chain and project management and stuff, which explicitly like deals with like that in a like in a I guess a more explicitly graph-based thing. But it's in the goal it's a graph as well. Like they particularly talk about that there are other like paths and stuff, other inputs and other outputs that aren't
Yes.
worth considering. Um, so
Yeah, but
fun
I'm
is
like,
a condescending and diminishing term.
I mean, suppose you have a chain like this. Like, if you just grab all the ends and you pull on them with equal pressure, there's a weakest link in the whole thing. It doesn't matter that it's a tree.
Yep.
You attach this to the wall over here. Here's the wall. Right?
Yep. Yeah, no, there's always going to be one like one shortest link or one, load bearing thing more than any others or
Yeah.
whatever else. I mean, and more to the point, one of the things that sort of occurs to me is that like so it feels like when he's talking about the analysis of bottlenecks and things like that, like forces applied and propagated through multiple links. I can imagine him thinking of when you see like a CAD diagram of a bridge where it's like colored to indicate various forces, and he'd say like, oh, look at this graph, like there's like all of these sort of bottlenecks everywhere or whatever, as opposed to like the actual like what Goldratt's sort of saying is like the point that's most colored or the most red part or whatever else, that's the bottleneck.
I
Um,
know.
and
I gave these people literally software explanations, like when you optimize software systems, which are not just a chain, a linear chain, there's tons of branching in software. You still find the bottlenecks, optimize those. That's the standard practical advice that programmers use.
yep, yeah. Um, yeah, no, it is. It's I mean, and you get codifications of that like pretty quickly, like look for loops in loops in loops. Um, it's like that's where your bottleneck's going to be. That's where you're going to be spending. If the profiling stuff is you're like looking at the number of calls and number of CPU time or the duration of CPU time, or IO or whatever else. But yeah, no, it's look for the things that are called all the time, that are used everywhere, that are common, that are
Yeah, he seems to think it's more feasible to just deal with everything as if it's all symmetric. Node is equally important, and just look at all the nodes compared to finding some more important nodes to focus on. He thinks that's literally more feasible, and it's too hard to find the places to focus our attention. So very opposite of Goldratt. Anyways, so use some of the social checklist.
Yep.
Uh,
Okay. So we've got who's putting in effort. So it's not a particularly high effort reply, and the first half is him just like, oops, where is it? Arguing, or saying, Goldratt's great, I'm great. So in terms of effort, this is a fairly like low effort, guess the subtleties type reply, or like the exact sort of meaning. He's not going to a lot of effort to try and explain this.
yeah.
He's not necessarily asking for a lot of effort though in return. I think that's explicit if it's there. He's sort of saying this is,
Yeah, he doesn't
well, no,
actually
but
ask for anything. Like he attacks Goldratt and then leaves the conversation as a dead end, which is actually hard to deal with. Because like he threw in an attack, but then he didn't leave any easy way to reply to him, and he didn't explain the attack enough that I had to ask a clarifying question.
yeah. I mean, it seems like the other way, like, in terms of a clarifying question, you could say like, you could quote this and say like, I think this is wrong, but then there's a burden on you to put more effort in. So it's sort of, he's not explicitly asking for effort, but the amount of effort that it would take to engage outside of a clarifying question is, or outside of a question, to actually just respond to it directly is high, relatively speaking.
Yeah, he's also signaling his expertise, which I added to the list.
Yep.
And he's attacking mine when he suggests that I may not have recognized a limit.
Yeah. Despite him saying that this is good enough to, like, are there no better books to give away than the goal?
Well, his narrative is that the goal is a great book, but some of its tools have limits and you have to know how to use them properly, and the problem is me, who hasn't recognized the limits and is trying to use the tools incorrectly.
So he's also forcing you to react to him. He's sort of, you've posted something, is like, Goldratt's great, I'm great. Here's a like a minor correction type thing, or a correction. So
Yeah,
you have to react.
he's not significantly reacting to what I said. Like, he doesn't engage with the specifics or details of what my point was. He sort of talks about his own thing and makes a kind of general statement.
You could say this literally about any post that mentions Goldratt or theory of constraints.
Yeah,
Like,
pretty much.
so who gets to question who? So it's in a position where you're forced to question him for more information, which is like he's putting himself in a relative, like in a higher social bracket type thing. Similar with the answers. I'm not sure if you had any like requests, but he definitely hasn't like responded
There
to anything
are
particular.
there are implied requests about like what project I'm doing and what I want from people who respond, which he's totally ignoring my framing and not engaging in ways that have much to do with like trying to please me or do my thing. Like, he's hijacking and bringing up his own thing with, I like to give this book away, and also I have this generic criticism that isn't really specific to your point. It's kind of derailing, like, I dispute your premises, Goldratt's wrong, and it's kind of a mess.
Mm.
Yeah, let's go back to John Wentworth and go through the checklist on him as well, because I think that
Okay,
gives
yeah.
more hints.
So he's not particularly high effort. Criticism's not amazing, but he's given you one. He's asking for effort from you. He's reacting, but not to anything particular.
Yeah, and
You
he's asking me to
like,
react to him. He's expecting me to react more.
yeah. So this is probably an unsatisfying reply to him, because you're like, I mean, in the one hand, like you've gone and made a new post, right? So it's not under him. It doesn't look like it's reacting to him. Although you do quote him at the top there, by the looks.
I did, yes.
So he's ignored any, unless you particularly asked for feedback, in this sort of sense, which I'm not sure about. But external to that, then he's not really responding to anything you've asked for. We've got, that's not super relevant because he's been clear. It's sort of positioned as though you're the one who's like trying to challenge the status quo by publishing something that doesn't have enough examples.
Yeah,
He's
so he comes off kind of uncaring, non-needy, won't be too bothered if I don't do anything. I mean, it's contradicted a little at the beginning, but he was lying.
Yep. And he's signaling the expertise by the sort of tone of his response as well.
Right, like for example, he didn't understand it, but since he's an expert, he knows that must be my fault.
Mm.
But he's confident that it wasn't his fault. It's too abstract, meaning he has the skill to read anything that is a reasonable level of abstractness.
And to judge whether it's too abstract or not abstract.
Yeah, read this paragraph quickly. This one was notable.
Sorry, I'm a little bit behind in there. Which the way you're reasoning. The way you're reasoning about systems of interconnected ideas is conjunctive. Every individual thing needs to be true. But some things are disjunctive, some one thing needs to be true. Okay, awkwardly phrased. Of course, there are even So just wait, disjunctive XOR, isn't XOR like the most basic disjunctive thing? Which are also used in everyday reasoning, but for now we'll do to consider only
I think
conjunction
most people would consider OR the main one. Like it's the standard English word.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, no, okay, I can see that.
Two separate people replied, suggesting that I didn't know what OR was, and my chains only deal with ands, and I'm just not very bright. And I certainly don't know exotic things like XOR.
Oh no, God forbid that XOR would come up. How complex. So yeah, implication as an exotic logical connective, like this is way over the top for what it's explaining. So it's like you're reasoning wrong. Okay, and then is he explaining like basic grammar, like a conjunction is a number of statements as
No, it's
strong as
not
the
grammar.
weakest?
By conjunction, he means
Okay,
an
no, no.
and. Logical conjunction.
Yeah, okay. A disjunction is number of statements at worst, like as strong as the strongest element. Okay. So this
Yeah,
feels like his.
two of them were just like, you can't math. Here's really, really basic math.
It feels really odd as well in that, so he's sort of using complex words for simple ideas.
Read the first paragraph too. It clarifies why he's saying that.
Okay. All right.
Just
There
this.
are special cases. So there's another case which you neglect, which can make weakest link reasoning highly inaccurate, and which is less of a special case than a tie-in link strength.
Yeah, so he
Do you
said I
use any of those
neglected
terms?
ors. Do I use any of those terms? I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like you've ignored ors is sort of the.
Yeah, which is, yeah, it's starting with simpler cases and they don't actually really matter. So there were those things. But yeah, he put in more effort, but he was extremely aggressive and hostile.
Yeah.
Anyway, so overall, what I think is notable about this is I got 6 replies. All 6 of them were socially nasty, and this was my first post back in like 3 years. I'm writing this like impersonal stuff about Goldratt, And then all of them write social attacks on me. 6 social attacks. That was the response. Like, there's something really screwy about that. And so what you can do is go to this post, and it includes those quotes. All the ones we just looked at are included in this post, so you can see a bit of stuff I post about them and compare, and read a few other ones. And you can try to analyze them before you read my analysis for each one. Maybe that would be a good project to work on.
Yep. So just these other first level replies.
Yeah, I did those, and I did other stuff. Like, I did a Mako Yes thing and an old Eliza thing and a Twitter thing. And I did not do the full posts on some of the comments. Sometimes I only did like a little thing. So you can do the whole post if you want, but I might not talk about it.
Yeah. That's cool. I'll see if there's anything. So yeah. So I think this would be good. It's a good follow-on from analyzing lies. But yeah, I'll cut stuff out when it's like a bit ridiculous, or like I'm not sure how much of this is relevant, for example. I'll
Yeah,
try to
and the
keep
other
it.
thing
Yeah.
that I suggest you do is work on your checklist, because I just made this really quickly, so it could probably be optimized a bit. There's probably a couple things missing and a couple that overlap too much. So you could
I
work
saw you
on
had
like a more practical checklist for it.
Yeah, I saw you had a big list of elements of social dynamic stuff that might be good to refer to in that regard.
Yeah, that's right here, social dynamics summary notes. So yeah, if you go through this, it'll help you work on the checklist.
Cool. All right, that sounds good. See you in 2 days.
Okay, bye.